day as being the chair, and I'd like to thank John as well at this stage for chairing at the last meeting. But also I have Lucy at my side here as our new clerk, so she will certainly keep you under control, because I know I won't be able to. Anyway, without any further ado, we'll get to cracking with this particular committee meeting, and we'll start off with the Sederunt and apologies, please.
Good morning. I have apologies today from Councillors Yen and Councillor Peacock.
Do we have any further apologies? No. Right. Can we then move declarations of interest? There are no declarations of interest. Right, minutes of the previous meeting on October the 3rd. Any? Pardon? There is indeed. I'd like to thank those for being present as well. That was good of you. So those present, do we have a agreement? That's very good. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to the next item 4, please. That will be the police performance report. A report by local area commander Kate. Would you be able to take us forward with that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, members will have had sight of both the covering report and probably the one that's of greatest interest to you, Appendix A, which outlines a number of indicators just as to how we have performed in the first 6 months. All the figures provided relate to the period 1st of April until the 30th of September in Appendix A. Members will remember that the policing priorities set by the committee relates to protecting people, reducing antisocial behaviour, reducing violence, substance misuse, making our roads safer and tackling serious organised crime and terrorism, which accords very well with Section 5 of our single outcome agreement for Dumfries and Galloway in terms of the safety and security of the region. Generally, in terms of the divisional performance, I reported to you in the covering report that Group 1 to 4 crimes, which are crimes of violence, sexual crimes, dishonesty and other crimes, rose slightly in the first 6 months by 0.3%. I can give you an update, members, that as of the 8th of November, we're actually seeing a downward trend now of just shy of 4% reduction in the level of Group 1 to crimes. So already, even from the point of submitting this report, there has been improvement in that performance figure. I do report that 17 less people were killed or seriously injured on the roads in comparison to last year, but I'll obviously go on to cover in a little bit more detail the actual reality of that situation. An increase in the supply for drugs and obviously a pleasing continuation of reduction in the number of incidents of vandalism that's been reported to us and compared to the previous year, but also I can report on the 5-year average. Group 1, the crimes of violence. I'm sure members, you only have to read any of the local papers to appreciate that certainly the first 3 months, I would suggest, of the new year, from the 1st of April, were fairly fast and furious in terms of some of the incidents that happened. And that did contribute to a lot of police resource responding to really very serious incidents. We have seen an increase in the number of robberies that I reported to you last month more generally. That total is 5. I'm not going to get caught up in discussing percentages, but there's an increase of 5 robberies in comparison to last year. The bulk of them, I would suggest, are the victim and the accused do know each other. There will be involvement of alcohol and drug misuse as well involved in those, but there are others. 3, I would suggest, most notable, which relate to elderly people who were attacked and people attempted to rob them of their purses, handbags. I'm also probably in a good position to advise you that individuals have been identified for all 3 of these cases and they have been reported to the Procurator Fiscal. So concerning, but detected as well. And there's been a kind of plan built around about visibility of police officers. And some advice, I don't know if members have noticed that some of the coverage around Morrison's and Dumfries, for instance, there was a lot of bushes and whatever there that made it really quite hidden for people walking back and forward to their properties, particularly elderly people who live in the area. That's all been cut away following some discussions with Morrison's, because what it allowed people to do was probably hide in there and wait for people coming past. So we're taking very strong actions in terms of preventing it and also visible policing. The other area, group one, that I probably just wanted to highlight, because it certainly was quite stark to me, is the amount of proactive work done by our officers when they are responding to calls to look at the care of children. And we have seen a significant rise of 8 incidents in comparison to last year, where when police have attended various properties, they've found children who should have been cared for safely by the adults in the house when the adults actually aren't fit to care for them, and we have reported them. Obviously, with colleagues in our partner agencies, we have worked in terms of child care, child protection processes as well, but I would mark that up, the actual rise in that level of crime as being much more proactive in that area. Group 2, crimes of indecencies. I think I indicated to you last time that whilst we have seen a rise of 50 crimes, if I can tell you that there are ongoing cases, 2 of which probably contribute to almost that whole total all by themselves in terms of one offender and the number of offences they've committed. So the point that I make is it's not necessarily 50 extra victims. It's a comparator in terms of the number of crimes that have been committed. And I do think that can be attributed to a far more robust and proactive approach by police to deal with people who commit sexual crime. A lot of those are in a domestic violence setting, and because of the changes to our approaches to dealing with domestic violence, that has actually contributed to this figure as well. Crimes of dishonesty, we've seen a reduction overall in comparison to the previous year and actually previous 3 years, and a slight reduction in the detection rate as well. Probably of most concern is we've seen a rise and a return to probably what is more a kind of more old-fashioned crime of housebreaking that we had last year was the lowest year we had ever seen in terms of housebreaking. This year is not following the same path, and actually we're seeing a lot more housebreakings of domestic houses being broken into. But I would want to reassure members that we do have a plan in place. There is a lot of visible patrolling and a lot of preventative work being done amongst the community teams to try and minimise the instance of this type of crime. And only this morning I was advised that an individual has been reported in connection with a number of dishonesty offences in the area as well. So we are very proactively detecting them as well. Group 5, I drew members' attention to last time, which are miscellaneous group. And it tends to track the proactive work that are done that's done by officers across the region, and I specifically draw your attention to this because it does relate basically to drugs activity around our disruption tactics and our detection tactics around dealing with people who supply drugs, but also it relates fundamentally to the activity around stop and search. And our stop and search processes have become more robust, and we have seen 1 in 4 people who are stopped and searched by the police have been found to have been committing some offence. Now that might be carrying offensive weapons, be in possession of alcohol, drugs, weapons, a number of areas. So Group 5 I draw to your attention because I think it is an indicator of the level of activity that we're seeing by officers. It also includes where we have a number of rural break-ins maybe happening, officers who are out carrying out routine patrols, looking to see what's going on. They're actually carrying out stop and search where that's appropriate. And again, that has actually reaped benefits as we've picked up individuals who have committed crime in our area and then they've tried to hot-foot it out. Finally, the point I would make is returning to the road traffic collisions. I did report that there was a reduction overall in those killed and serious injuries, but it would be remiss of me not to actually acknowledge that tragically 7 people have lost their lives on our road this year in comparison to 2 last year. The year before it was 6 for this period of time, so in terms of numbers it looks stark compared to last year, but in comparison to the year before it's about on track, but I'm sure you'll agree that's not really an acceptable position, and there is an awful lot of visible policing on our roads being carried out in terms of that careless, inconsiderate and reckless driving by individuals who choose perhaps to use their mobile phone when they're driving, which is dangerous, but probably more concerningly as well, those who choose to drive without wearing their seatbelt. And there's obviously a great deal of evidence presented to us that tell us that if you're wearing your seatbelt, you have a greater likelihood of survival in a crash. And sadly, some people have lost their lives that had they been wearing a seatbelt, they would not have lost their lives. So there is a great deal of activity in the road policing side, as I'm sure you can see from the figures produced in Appendix A, that actually show the level of activity, not just by our road traffic crews, but also by all police officers who are patrolling the various roads across Dumfries and Galloway. I'm more than happy, Chair, to answer any specific questions about the figures presented in Appendix A, but probably I would want to finish and say, can I just reassure members that it does continue to be one of the safest places to live. I felt it was important to write that in the report for all the figures that we've handed out, and the level of crime and road casualties is relatively low in comparison. But to give you that reassurance, we are not being complacent, and there is a great deal of activity ongoing across the whole area to make sure that we sustain and improve on that position.
Can I thank you, Kate, for a very comprehensive overview of the paper and the report that's in front of us. Are there any questions that we would like to put at this stage? If there aren't, can I suggest? Yes, okay, Ronnie.
Just look at the recommendations. It says scrutinise, you've got to ask questions, or you're not scrutinising, so I'll ask questions. It's a thing I do anyway. Item 14, there's a lot of narrative there, but there's no figures. And so that was an observation, and that's probably the most lowest level. This is antisocial behaviour and disorder stuff, you know, either perceived or real. We need to get a handle on that, because I know that's one of the complaints a lot of us get. The other thing I was going to ask, since April, because you collate figures slightly differently, some of these haven't got direct comparisons going back. So I imagine that in the future we'll get that comparison. So maybe answer one question.
Councillor Ogilvie, you're absolutely right. I'll answer the last one first, because that's the easiest one to answer. This would be the baseline for a few of these. This year's figures will give us a baseline for next year to use accurate comparison to. So you're absolutely right. Where we have no direct comparison, it would seem sensible to call this the baseline year, and you will see year-on-year figures after that. In terms of the point 14, I felt it was appropriate to add a narrative. Probably the easiest option for me would have been not to include it. But I think you're absolutely right. That is the issues of disorder and antisocial behaviour probably blight the greatest number of people, and I think it's only right that we report to this committee. And all it is a slight technical issue, just to make sure that it's all about coding on different systems, and we've obviously pulled in and working with a new national system, and our local system works on slightly different codes. So what we're trying to do is make sure those codes are absolutely catching everything. So we're not under-reporting to yourselves, and we're not under-reporting to ourselves, but equally not over-reporting and double-counting. Early indications, because I did suspect that would be asked, is that we have seen roughly a 50% drop in the number of incidents of disorder being reported to us. And that is probably really surprising, given what a fabulous summer we had in terms of weather. But actually, in comparison to summer elsewhere in Scotland, Dumfries and Galloway did not see the same levels of disorder and antisocial behaviour that I think some of my colleagues elsewhere saw. And I'm not sure I can actually give you an explanation for that, other than a bit of the feel-good factor. But I would hope by the next meeting those issues would be remedied, and we'll be able to give retrospective information. But early indications are that we have seen probably quite a significant drop in that level of incident.
Thank you. I'll tell you, I was just wondering, with what's happening, and I suspect, I know that Councillor Nichols to come in next, we will be jumping around throughout this appendix. Would it be agreeable with the members that we just take it page at a time, so that we can give it the thorough scrutiny it rightly deserves? Is that an agree? Would you agree with that? Right. Okay then. So if we turn to page 15 and start off with violence, disorder and antisocial behaviour, do we have any points on that particular page that we would like to put to page? Councillor Ogilvie, please.
It's just an observation. Obviously, because we've got low statistics on murder, 2 murders is a 200% increase. And that's the difficulty with small statistics. They can be skewed so dramatically. It's a bit worrying when you see the crimes of violence. I know there's a reasoning behind that, but victims are +16, but the change is +26%. I'm not quite sure what the difference is.
The only difference is there's 16 more victims than there were the same time last year, and the percentage change of level of incidents is 26%, so it's a quarter rise. Those 16 attribute to a quarter rise, but so that's the percentage change relates to the overall figures. The victims, it just gives an indication of how many extra victims that means. So it's probably just, rather than putting difference, it's probably just the difference between last year and this year, Councillor, in terms of numerical value.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor Nichols?
Yeah, I'm just being pedantic here, I think, probably, but no murders to 2 murders is not a 200% increase, it's an infinitesimal increase, if you're being absolutely technically correct.
Chair, if you're happy where the numbers are very low at future meetings, I'm quite happy to leave out the percentages, which I think gives a kind of skewed figure. No, I agree, because actually all you do is then pick up percentages as opposed to numerical. I think gives a far greater indication, and I think percentage is useful to see percentage rise where the numbers are slightly bigger, but as you say, it gives a slight skewing.
If we pick it up, the press could pick
Yes.
it up.
Thank you, Kate. I think that's actually a very common sense sort of approach to the whole process. Right, okay, then we'll move, it's no further on that particular page. We'll move on to page 16. Is there anything on that? Yes, can I bring in Councillor Thompson, please?
Thank you, Chair. This sort of ties in a couple of points, actually. So on the petty common assault, and also touched on by the following stop and search. I think it's really just, I was interested if you can maybe explain a wee bit more. I understand that stop and search has to be intelligent, and that would be the move towards proving the, obviously, 1 in 4 yielded a result, as it were. And also in the petty common assault, there's a description of the fact that further analytical work to identify meaningful data. And I'm just wondering, is the intelligence divisional, or is it, it's just really just to see where's the intelligence coming from, and is it local division that's actually targeting us locally, or is it national?
The intelligence data comes from the local division, and we have analysts who work across Police Scotland, some of whom are based in my division anyway, so what you're looking for is the best resource to be able to do that. There's actually quite a lot of work that we're doing, and analytical work that's been done is to work out how do you separate what is public space violence and then what is effectively domestic violence, so behind closed doors. And it's about making sure that we have a really true picture of what is public space violence, because that's where your stop and search becomes much more effective, because you're then focusing your patrols in the right area to perhaps catch people who have had either too much to drink, have gone out with the sole intention of causing trouble. They tend to be in our towns across the area. You wouldn't be surprised to know that some of the hotspots for us are in towns across Dumfries and Galloway, and that's where we focus. So what we're trying to do is the further analytical work is be a little bit more sophisticated to see if we can separate some of the information about serious assaults to say how many were in a domestic setting that were behind closed doors that we wouldn't see unless reported to us. How many are those things that the greater number of the public are actually exposed to make sure that we obviously have a plan and approach, robust approach for domestic violence, but equally to have the same plan to have a better understanding of what our public space violence looks like. Therefore, we would have a better targeting process for our stop and search, and it would be very much intelligence-led to say public space violence happens in a certain area, that's where you need to be.
Yes, you wish to come back?
Yes, thank you. And just on that, just sort of touched on the number 8 robbery, just to do with substances at play. In terms of like the relationship that the Dumfries and Galloway has with alcohol, is that something that Scotland or the division is working to all the variables?
Just prior to becoming a part of Police Scotland, we did a piece of work which was exactly that, which was looking at the alcohol influence on our crime, and we had an analytical product prepared in relation to that, and that's mapped into a lot of our plans as well. Now, I would anticipate that'll be part of an ongoing analytical request to actually see how many are alcohol fueled, but you'll not be surprised to know that actually alcohol and drugs fuel probably a significant proportion of our incidents, and that's why we work very closely with the Alcohol and Drug Partnership and through other means as well to make sure that we have, it's not just about the police, we probably have the statistical information, but how we work with partners to try and address some of that alcohol related crimes. Now, I have had discussions previously with colleagues in Scottish Government about interventions when people come into custody, about getting that arrest referral type process. And I know that's a bit of work that's ongoing because that's sometimes the time where you can actually get people the help that they need. So we're continuing to pursue a lot of that to try and tackle it from both ends. One, make sure it doesn't happen and hopefully everybody gets home safely. But the other part is to try and start proactively addressing people's need to get absolutely plastered and then want to fight with everybody, because I don't think that's helpful, and partner agencies are helping us do that as well.
Thank you. Before we go for that page, I was actually going to ask the question under the petty common assaults, where it talks about they have increased considerably, and then in the second line it talks about the abnormally lower level on the previous year. Is there any value in, when you have a situation like that, of giving more figures of previous years to give us an indication of just what has happened, with the figures, and also if there was an understanding as to why it was an abnormal year?
Chair, I'm more than happy to give you probably the previous data held on specific instances where I have it. I think last year we absolutely acknowledged that our level of not just common assaults, but other assaults and incidents was exceptionally low. But if you look back to the 3-year average, or even where I can to the 5-year average, I can actually give you that. I think in terms of common assaults, and I know that Mr. Moss and my ACC would tell you as well, we're probably looking at this being the baseline, because what we've seen is a real growth in the number of cases of domestic violence being reported to us, which I see as twofold. One, it's about us having a far more robust approach to dealing with offenders who are violent, but equally it seems to have generated an improved level of confidence that victims have in coming forward. So where before we would maybe struggle to get complaints made, they're now not only making complaints about the incident we're called to, we're actually able to go into some of the historical incidents as well, and that's boosted numbers. So I would hope after this year that I would be able to give you some greater detail about what that actually looks like and what's influenced that rise in figures so that we can then start benchmarking that against future years. And I think separate that part out about public space, because I would imagine as elected members, whilst we can report on domestic violence, I think it's as equally interesting for you to know what the level of public space violence, to where the greatest number of public have access to, what kind of levels of violence we're seeing and how we're actually tackling.
Thank you very much. I think members would find that very helpful. Okay, we'll move on to page 17. Do we have any points on page 17? Yes, Councillor Nicholl.
Thanks, Chair. It's to do with the stop and searches. I mean, I know it's a new phenomenon, really, for Dumfries and Galloway. Have you had many objections from human rights, people thinking of infringing their rights by stopping them, claimed they hadn't done anything wrong, or has that gone quite smoothly, that side of it?
You will always get people who will challenge that approach that we take, but actually it's been significantly low. Quite a lot of them are actually compliant and therefore have agreed to it. And in terms of the 400,000 stop searches that have been done across Scotland, I think we've only had 19 complaints made against police. 19. But that comes back to Councillor Thompson's point. If you're in the right place at the right time, stopping the right people, and you've got a 1 in 4 success rate, I would suggest, one, there's little room for complaint by the 1 in 4, and for the other 3 and 4, we're actually finding a great deal of compliance because the officers are explaining why they're being stopped, why they're being searched, and therefore they've compliantly agreed to it and are more than happy to do it. Don't know, Mr. Moss, if you want to say anything in addition to that.
Thank you, Chair. My name's Wayne Mawson. I'm the ACC West of Scotland. Kate's absolutely right. In fact, if anything, she's probably undersold the quality of the work going on in this division in Dumfries and Galloway. What Kate hasn't alluded to is she's actually the second highest performer in the whole of Scotland around her positive hit rate, stop and search. So selling the message right to all the constables, briefing them really, really well when they come on duty and say, go to that place because houses were broken into during the night, or go to that place because we think there's a cannabis factory there, etc., etc. Officers are going there, doing the stop and search and finding it. In fact, Kate, I think you're around about 25, 26%. There's only K Division, which is the Paisley area, in the whole of Scotland that is any better than that, and that's only about 1% higher. So you really are market leaders in terms of getting the message right, not just internally with our staff, but also externally. And by that I mean, what I say to all my constables, and I've been out on night duty in Dumfries, driving a van, treat the members of the public as if they were a member of your family. So you will have to make difficult decisions, you will have to make difficult stop searches, and people might not be happy about it, but if you tell them why and treat them with dignity and respect, actually they will comply and they will not complain, and they will make your lives easier as well. And that is clearly what is happening in this area in Dumfries and Galloway, because the success speaks for itself.
Next page, 18. Yes, Councillor Blake.
Just one part, still on stop searches. Does this include the Section 23 misuse of drugs? I see there a reference to that.
Yes, exactly, it does, because what it breaks down into how many were consensual, how many are legislative. So the likes of drug searches, firearm searches, understandably are legislative. So it breaks it down further for me to understand what kind of level of interaction that we're having. But Councillor Blake, it does absolutely include drug searches too.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to... Right, moving on to the next page, 19. Any points to raise? Nope, quite happy with page... Sorry, yes, Councillor Ogilvie.
Fresh in my brain. Mr. House has made this one of his key priorities. If you've watched him on the telly. And I don't know if this is because of the publicity that's been folk are actually reporting more, or there's going to be. It's like everything else. If you have a promotion, you know, or that's not the right word. You know what I mean? I think the right word, but never mind. If you raise the profile, folk come and report it. It's the same with Esther Ransom when she started Child. It seemed like, God, all this just happened, but it was out there, just nobody reported it. So is that the case here, do you think, or are we looking at increases in domestic violence?
I think members will remember I've probably been at this meeting before where we've talked about trying to breach the gap between reality and what's reported to us, and I think we're getting closer to what reality is, and it's been more confident that's a narrowing position. I think when it's a huge gap between what's reported to us, and we know that reality is telling us through some partner agencies and some of the support groups that it's massive, we're not hitting it right. I think it's also supported, and I know Councillor Ogilvie, you were here at the last meeting that we talked about the multi-agency tasking and coordinating, the MATAC that's referenced there, which is a slightly new process for us, because what it does is it actually tackles the offender, so it starts from a different perspective and it goes to the offender to see what contact they've had and what partners they've had. So rather than leaving perhaps one victim on their own speaking out against an individual, if you look at it from the perpetrator's point of view, you actually find other witnesses and potentially, sadly, other victims. And those people have felt more confident to come forward because they're not speaking on their own. They're actually with a group of people that are have found themselves in the same position. And that's actually contributed to it. And I think there has been a rise in confidence. But to be honest, with police, we can't do that on our own. That's through support of the third sector agencies, through our statutory colleagues as well, and all the multi-agency partnerships, domestic abuse, violence against women partnership, child protection, and probably that wider GIRFEC. We are starting to make sure the circle's complete and not put all the onus on the victims to come forward, but more start with the perpetrators and take them on in a much more robust way, which I think is for us reaping benefits, because we're managing to close that gap between reality and actually those that are reported, which I think is a positive stance.
Thank you. Bringing in Councillor
Chair again. Number 17 on page 18, percentage of domestic incidents result in crime being recorded, developing that at the moment. Where are those being reported at the moment? Obviously, if you start reporting separately, it's going to show a decrease somewhere else.
Sorry, all it would do, Councillor, is it'll give us an indication of how many move from being a reported incident to actually a crime being recorded for it, because some incidents are not actually crimes. So through this whole section, you will see level of incidents, those that are then, you can attrition across to being crimes, identified crimes, and being reported on them. So they will all be reported in there, but we'll be able to show you how many of the reported incidents are then transferred into crimes, reports of crimes, because some incidents do not result in any crime report being raised.
Thank you. Moving on to page 20. Yes, I have Marion. Sorry, Councillor. Marion, right.
Thank you, Chair. Just come back to the domestic abuse. I don't know if you're maybe able to tell me or not, but do you know what the percentage is of the male victims? And if there is, do you feel it's been an increase in it since last?
There are, it's probably single figures, Councillor McCutcheon, which it always has been quite low, and it's about trying to get people to come forward. And I know there's a lot of work being done by some of the partnership groups to look at the additional support that can be given locally to male survivors of such crimes. So I think, again, it's probably just slightly lagged behind in terms of raising confidence that it's actually okay to come forward. But the percentage, certainly in Dumfries and Galloway, is still relatively low. And I think it's still probably pretty much in single figures, but I can get clarity on that for you and come back to you on that.
You wish to come back in? Yeah. Okay then.
Thank you. Maybe, I know we get a lot of no advertising, but for the women of domestic abuse, but we don't see very little about the men. Maybe if we could look in that area and give them a bit that just because they're a man doesn't make them any less of a man, but to come forward, because personally I know of 3 at the now that has experienced it, and horrendous, and it's so sad that they feel that it's going to be less of a man to come forward. So maybe if we could look, maybe it'd be great in the future if we could maybe encourage them, say no, it's no, and it makes you any less of a man to come forward and say such things.
Chair, I'm more than happy to take that away to an appropriate group to have a discussion, and we can come back and feed back to the next meeting.
Okay, we seem to have a bit of interest in this particular page. I've got Councillor Thompson, then Councillor Simon, Councillor Ogilvie in that order. So Councillor Thompson. Sorry? Right, can I then move on to Councillor?
We're on page 20 here. On 22, it's similar to the stop and search, and it comes into the drugs cultivation. I live in an area where there's a lot of empty housing, and they're all owned by private landlords or RSLs. And quite often when I'm out and about, we sometimes come across properties where you visit a couple of times, nobody's around, and the neighbours tell you, well, they only come on a Friday. They're at Dumfries the rest of the week. And you sometimes have your doubts of what's happening in there. Is there any way working with the landlords, RSLs, to be able to search these premises to see what's going on there? Because there has been a wee rise in our area of people that have been cultivating illegal substances. Is there any chance that we could work with them, together with them, to maybe have a wee look inside to see what's happening in these properties? Because it's obvious they're not using them as their main domestic dwelling.
I'm certainly aware, Councillor, just a year or so, or a couple of years ago, we actually did inputs to RSLs to make them aware of the signs and symptoms of maybe their properties not being used for the best of intentions. And I'm more than happy to go back and have some discussion with my community-based officers to see if we can generate some discussion or a kind of plan there, and have a discussion with agencies. They were certainly really receptive, and I was at one at Stranraer, which Councillor Foster was the most well-attended thing I've ever been at with RSLs, and actually they were very good at coming forward, and a lot of it was about giving them some confidence about what action they could take, what they should report in. If I can tell you, the bulk of the cannabis cultivations that have been reported to us, a lot of those have come from intelligence from the public, who have noticed exactly what you say. So again, I would actively encourage them to keep telling us about suspicious activity or things that don't make sense, and I'll take it away, and we'll maybe revisit some of the work with the Register Social Landlords again, and a lot of it is just giving them the information they need to know when something looks a bit not right.
Okay, Councillor Ogilvie.
Sorry, Chair, I thought we were going page by page. Could I go back to page 19, please? It's hate crime. I live in Annan, and there's a large Polish community there. And this is no criticism, but they seem to thrive off vodka. And I saw it myself, especially at the Ride the Marches, where there was a gang fight on Solway Street, and young lads against the young Polish, you know, and certainly, yeah, get me back home stuff. And I've heard other stuff, anecdotal, from older people about they get all the housing. So there's a, you know, well, how can I put this? It's not a crime as such. It's not hatred. It's just enough type thing, you know. And I don't know how that's recorded. I just wondered what through the partners we could educate people that, you know, these people are here doing, a lot of them are doing good jobs, and they work in the big factories and that, and to change the debate, because even within my own family, and maybe no press here, they say they got the houses, and the whole state's full of Polish people now. Our own kids can't get them, so there's a bit of a resentment building. And as I say, it's low key, except for what I saw with the drinking and fighting. But with the older members of the society, there's a bit of intolerance starting to build. And I just wondered how we could address that.
I absolutely take your point. I mean, interestingly enough, some of the hate crimes that we're talking about here, actually, we've had incidents with Eastern European individuals who live in our communities that have not amounted to any offences of hate crime coming up, and they're actually seen as part of the community who just want to fight. Unfortunately, what I will do is take this back to the diversity group and just make sure that there's some of that positive publicity going out as well, because I absolutely agree the levels and the numbers of individuals who want to fight are probably proportionately the same as born and bred Dumfries and Galloway folk who want to actually fight, and it's about not creating attention. There was another incident in Annan last night which involved people from the Annan area and also a young man who lives in the Annan area who is of Polish origin, and it is not a hate crime at all. It is a row after a party, which sounds very familiar, I'm sure, to all of us. So I'll take it away and just see if we can do a little bit more public publicity, and it is about that, ensuring there's tolerance of all the people in our area. But if Sharon Melville, my diversity officer, was sitting here, there's a lot of work gone into putting forward third-party reporting to make sure that they're trying to improve that level of tolerance of all groups and communities. And what we're trying to do is deal with the hard-to-reach ones who have cultures that are slightly different from ours. And I think that's the biggest challenge, but they do continue to work on that.
Thank you. Right, page 21, this is the final sort of grouping of additional identified local priorities. Any comments or questions? Councillor Syme?
Kate, about this before, I still have a lot of difficulty with the situation where people can escape with a horrendous background of sexual offences, say come into the likes of Dumfries and Galloway, and we have very little control over the monitoring of them. There has been cases recently where this has happened, and I feel that our communities are at risk for a certain time while these people get integrated into communities. And the only way they can be stopped is when they start reoffending again, as they normally do. And I know it's a great difficulty for the police to deal with, but I don't feel that our local communities should be put at risk by, say, somebody that escapes from the south of England, perhaps, and can come up here and integrate and then carry on their offences. Quite often it might be internet offences. Is there no way we control that to protect our communities? And I know it is difficult, but when they say these people are getting monitored, they're usually for hundreds of miles away. Is there any way that we can protect our communities from this sort of situation?
Councillor Syme, I think you know the answer probably to that before I actually speak, but I'll try and give. I know, I thought you would. Probably the reassurance I would give is where they are convicted offenders, that is about managing and monitoring them, and that is very much done locally, and that's built into the community officers as well as the offender management. The greatest angst I probably have are those offenders that have not been reported by anybody to the authorities and actually carry on, and you get a history of them. And those are the ones that we really do value. It won't be the first time I've gone out asking the public to tell us about any suspicious activity. And actually, that's where you see it, because they do start to behave in a certain way. And I always say, you know when it doesn't look right, and please just pick up the phone. We've got disclosure processes where that's appropriate to do, make disclosures about individuals. Where they are eligible for housing, it's a matter for the housing department to decide whether or not it's suitable for them to move in, and there's some quite stringent checks there taken where we know about any of their past history. The huge challenge is when they buy their own house. That is what I'm afraid you cannot you know, I can't step in and say you're not coming here, or you can't do this and you can't do that, because if they buy their own house or they have family that live there, and a lot of times I cannot prevent them moving in there unless they have registered sex offenders and you've got some measure of control over where they actually live. So it is an ongoing concern, councillor. I'm not sure that I can stop it altogether, but I probably would give you the assurance that we will do everything we can, and it's not just about the specialist offender management teams, it's actually every police officer in Dumfries and Galloway do their very best to respond to community concerns. And as I've said before, the community are actually very, very proactive in advising us of when something doesn't seem right and reporting it, and we actively take action where we can.
Thank you. Right. Move on to page 22. Any points there that we wish to raise? Oh, oh, sorry, Councillor Nicholl.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Your rape detection rate, Kate, 94%. But are we talking big numbers here? Are we talking very small numbers? Rape.
Sorry, it's about 33 rapes, so I think we've solved about 30, 31.
Could just go back. I'm surprised it's
Councillor Nicola, a lot of those come out of the robust approach to domestic abuse, and actually it's multiple offences by some offenders, so that's where we're starting to see them, where we've got stronger cases against these individuals that we had previously.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Road traffic casualties. I remember sitting here, previous constable and others, a few years ago now, and this was a big problem for us. You know, young people getting killed. Remember what happened at the Glen and stuff like that. And there's been a lot of programmes, education stuff done. It was interesting to see a national report earlier in the week about A roads are the most dangerous, and that's borne out in where I live. Most of the accidents are happening on A and B roads, not the motorways. That's where you catch all the speeders and make your money. But the accidents are happening. Sorry, I've just a wee niggle of mine. The point I'm making is, we see a lot more traffic cops out now. But they tend to be, well, I've seen them in Annan and that one about. But how do you police A roads and B roads in this area? Because, you know, and that's where, as I say, the national statistics, you know, that's the most dangerous. I know it's not easy, but we used to concentrate on the arterial routes, major roads, but this evidence now suggests that we have to be more parochial.
No, it absolutely is, and that's probably why you're seeing road patrol officers in the towns away from the main arterial routes, because exactly that. We did, we had an analytical product done, I think it was last year, that told us some of the highest incidents of road crashes was the A709 to Lockerbie, was the 701, was the 711 to Derbyti, where we see the greatest number of them. So that's passed out to officers, so not only road patrol officers, but also the community-based officers. They know that visible patrolling there is actually going to hopefully improve driver behaviour. That, along with a lot of the publicity that we put out talking about careless and inconsiderate driving, and I would go back to mobile phones, not wearing your seatbelt, and just leaving far, far too late to get to a meeting that you're never going to get to. And actually 50% of the collisions are caused by some method of inconsiderate driving, or where you've used mobile phones or no seatbelts, or just far, far too late and far, far too reckless in terms of their approach, which we are going to continue to tackle. Probably one of the other areas, and it is a very sensitive issue, is you quite rightly point out, we talked about young drivers previously. Can we go to the other end of the scale of older drivers? I'm trying hard not to look at anyone. I do think there's a piece of work that we need to do, because as you all appreciate, life on the roads is very, very fast and very quick. And I think for some drivers, too fast and too quick for them. So I think we need to do a little bit more work round about giving some real safety advice for some of the older drivers we have, just in terms of keeping themselves safe when they're on the road, because I absolutely appreciate this is a largely rural area, and for a lot of them that is their only means of transport, really meaningful transport, but we have to keep them safe. And actually for a lot of them who have sadly caused accidents where other people have perhaps either lost their lives or become seriously injured, they're actually having to live with that as well. So we're not really keeping them safe in terms of that part either. So I think that's going to be a bit of a proactive piece of work that we really need to do to try and, you know, get that message out. And it is about not telling them to stop driving, but to actually give them some really clear safety advice specific to them.
I think we should also recognise at this stage the local lad, David Coulthard, and his highlighting of rural road driving. It actually got a national award, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, work has definitely been done in that area. So I'd like to bring in Councillor McCutcheon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to the rape detection rate, please? You said there was 33 reports that come in, and correct, if I listened to you correctly, you said that a lot of that was maybe from the one person. Do you find that that is because they're just the people that's getting raped, and they reporting it straight away, or is it a reporting it, they're getting charged, and then the perpetrators come back into the relationship and it's happening again?
There's probably two kind of groups here. There's those that report rapes, and they contribute easily to quite a number of those 33. But when I go back to the process where I said in domestic abuse cases, we perhaps look from the perpetrator's point of view. What we do is go back to the victim and what they then tell you about maybe the incident that's resulted in the police being called on that occasion. But when they sit down with the specialist officers and they get a statement, what you find out is there have been multiple incidents within that relationship. If we have dealt with them in any way, I think there's been very few where actually after we've dealt with them, if any, I would have to say, where they've gone back and they're still in the same relationship, because what you try and do with that MATAC process is you build a safety plan round about the victims to make sure that they are not tempted to go back to a relationship or put themselves in a position where they're likely to be harmed. So there's a lot of work done with partner agencies to try and prevent such instances happening again.
Thank you, Kate. And Councillor Nicholl, you wish to?
Yeah, just to comment more than a question. I think when people get really old, they get slower, and that can cause a lot of frustration from the people who are behind them. It reminds me of the wife's dear lamented auntie. And she said she claimed she'd never had an accident, but I always claimed there was 100 had been killed avoiding her. You know, so there's that side of it as well.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Ogilvie.
Yeah, thanks for indulgence. I've raised this locally, but, well, the individual officer. But there's a lot of younger lads that are heavily modifying their cars, mostly Volkswagen-based type, Seats, Volkswagen, and the amount of reek coming up the back, you can tell they're heavily modified because they've got additional radiator or oil cooler stick out the front, and exhaust like that, which upsets everybody. But it's the amount of smoke coming up the back. Now, there's two things I asked the question of. Does the insurance company know they've heavily modified? And would they pass an MOT with the amount of soot that comes out the back? Because most of us have half-decent cars. My Ford had needed a thingy exchanger, particulate exchanger, £300 to change it. It's liquid based. So I make the point to keep my car roadworthy. I had to spend that sort of money. So I just wondered, I remember there used to be officers, come in and put the thing up the check him. I wonder if that would be appropriate sometime in and around Annan. Sorry, I got parochial. I felt like John Symes there.
No, I mean, I'll take that back to my road patrol colleagues, but I know it's part of the ongoing work that when they do see and they do carry out some of the action that we take, and you see it all over because you see them in Dumfries as well as, I'm sure, Castle Douglas, we've done plans round about there too, as well as over in Stranraer. So I'll just make sure that that's built into it, but it is part of the ongoing when we do targeted pieces of work. It's not just focusing on one thing, it's actually looking at them all, and you're absolutely right. And you can believe me when I tell you insurance companies are actually quite surprised at the level of modification that we report on, and it actually null and voids some of their insurance.
Moving on to page 23. Yep. Yes, indeed, John.
It's on 34 speeding. We've a great difficulty in Upper Nistdale, when I've been parochial again, the biggest problems in Kirkconnell. With speeding HGVs going through the village, especially in the evening. And I'm talking about Sankirk, Thornhill as well, or the settlements up there. I was advising through the community council, we got the speed boards out and tried to get some evidence there. I've been to Transport Scotland. But these things, you actually have to stand there at times and see what the people have to put up with the speeding vehicles get through the village. When we go to the speed boards, they maybe catch a couple speeding and then everybody's on their phones or whatever and flashing lights and that, and you don't get a true record. I had an issue up in the 76 yesterday during the day, and it was absolutely horrendous, the speed at some of the heavy goods vehicles. And you know that some of the incidents out there, Kate, have been caused by speeding heavy goods vehicles. Is there any way that we can sort of look at that again to try and reduce the speed of these vehicles going through the villages? Because you remember some time ago there was a situation in Sankirk where the glue lorry overturned. Well, you can't overturn a glue lorry at 30 mile an hour, you know. He would have stuck to the speed limit, he would have. But if that had happened in the middle of Kirkconnell, it would have taken away 3 houses because it's so tight. And I do really have an issue with that, and I'm really worried that sometime it could be more catastrophic if something goes off the road at night, because the speed to go through is absolutely horrendous.
I think, yeah, you know, I'd pick up a couple of points in terms of what you say. You're absolutely right. I think because of the relative narrowness of the high street in Kirkconnell, or the main street in Kirkconnell, I think can make even vehicles travelling just over the 30 miles an hour appear to be going faster. And it is about driving within what is safe to do so. The other point you raise about the minute we put a traffic car up there, do you know, even the unmarked traffic vehicle, we don't get many hits before everybody knows about it. But I'll certainly take it back to colleagues both within the community base and also in the road policing to see if we can do any kind of other activity. But I suppose it'll just be that perennial keep trying at it and do the very best we can in terms of visible patrols on that road when we can.
Just when we do these initiatives as well, it's usually the motorists we capture. We seem to catch very few of these heavy goods.
And I would also say, Councillor, unfortunately a lot of them are locals as well, which is not really helpful and probably not where we want to be. But we'll go back and revisit it and see what other efforts we make with some of our colleagues to try and improve that situation.
Thank you. We have Councillor Nicholl. Can I also ask that you make your comments brief? We are actually spending an hour so far on this particular item. It would be good to, you know, try and get through the businesses. You know.
Comments are always brief, sir. It's under speeding, and I'm not declaring an interest. I don't think I've contributed to these numbers. I'm not just convinced about that, but anyway. It's the camera enforcement unit. These figures are reported separately. Where are they reported? Because I don't see them in these papers.
No, they're reported through, it's a national group, so they're reported to the Safety Camera Partnership nationally, and I think there's moves afoot there reforming, subject of some review as well.
Hope that was brief enough. Skipper.
That was excellent. Very much appreciated. Page 24. Yes, councillor. Sorry, or you wish to come in? Sorry.
I'll be brief. I've waited long enough for page 23. It's the dangerous driving, it's the irresponsible driving and driving behaviour. In the town of Dumfries, the amount of vehicles that are jumping the lights at the bottom of the sands coming onto Buccleuch Street, from Glasgow Street going down, from Galloway Street cutting across. I'm surprised there's not been a really serious accident. I've asked, and the timing of the lights is perfect for to let the cars through. But I've sat many a time in Buccleuch Street in the lights and watched 5 coming up through the sands after the lights have gone to green. And this is, it's dreadful. The lights in Buccleuch Street have gone to green. There's still 5 coming up. Yeah. Thank you. That was brief.
That almost. It was a good attempt. Right, well, I'll move on to Councillor Thompson. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that was good.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just on this similar point to do with the figures being reported separately. But I noticed that obviously there's 41 numbered points up for scrutiny. So it was almost asking, what should we always expect 41, or is there sort of areas where you yet to come up with the figures to report on, or will it be a sort of movable feast depending on what's happening? So are there areas that will be able to scrutinise and other areas that may or may not be able to?
It's probably an early stage and whilst this looks fairly significant with 41 points, I probably wanted to be in a position that I gave you a lot of information rather than very little. It will be an evolving process, and probably what I would say, Chair, is if it's agreeable to you, is I will, if there's any proposed changes, additions to it that we think would be valuable, is have some discussion prior to the meeting and then present it at the meeting as options, because I think the most unhelpful thing for you is to have a report that absolutely chokes your inbox and maybe has indicators that you don't feel are as relevant to hear. And equally, we'll probably do a little bit of work round about tying it much more in with what the local priorities and that objective setting. So I think it might change a little and evolve in time, but hopefully we'll have the indicators that are most relevant to the priorities that are set, and equally that are of greatest interest to yourself to scrutinise.
Thank you. Page 24. No points, page. Sorry? That's what I like to hear. Good. Right, then we'll swiftly move on to page 25. Yes, Councillor.
I was going to ask about mobile phones, but I'll leave that one. I used to chair the complaints against the police, and it was a question we've asked several times, what's happening now, because it was a good exercise for those that was on it to checks and balances that the police were acting properly and acting upon their complaints. Now, I don't know what's happened now with the police force. I mean, the statistic there doesn't really mean much on its own. So it's just a general question, Chair, is what's happening in Police Scotland as regards complaints and how they're being scrutinised.
Complaints are under the responsibility of the Deputy Chief Constable Designate, Mr Richardson, and he has a responsibility to report to the Scottish Police Authority in terms of those complaints figures. We obviously have the PIRC, which is the national oversight body in terms of police complaints as well, so there's sufficient scrutiny at that national level. In terms of what you'll get locally is I'll continue, this will probably develop, to be honest. So you see some of the local resolution complaints, so the lower level ones, but the serious misconduct and anything relative to criminality, councillor, is scrutinised under the direction of the Deputy Chief Constable. Also in terms of the divisional performance in relation to this area, I don't think Mr Mawson's here to check up on me, but part of the scrutiny that he places us under is to better understand the performance of our staff, and that also includes this, what are locally resolved, and actually what responsibility is placed on individuals to moderate their behaviour, and then what oversight I have as divisional commander on that. So I think that public confidence part will probably grow and evolve just when I get a clearer picture of where that separation lies. But there is scrutiny nationally about those serious ones, and hopefully at a local level we'll be able to do some more work just in terms of the figures. What they will not change their view on is the arrangements in Dumfries and Galloway previously was that you had sight of some of the key papers, that they are papers that are the responsibility of the Deputy Chief Constable designate, and he's asked that for consistency that we do not continue with that process.
Can I thank all members for their contribution on this particular report, and when we go back to the recommendations, members are asked to scrutinise the policing performance for the period outlined as detailed in sections 5 and 6 and Appendix A against the same period of 2012-13. Are you happy to agree with the recommendations? Very much. We'll now move on to item 5. This is the report, Police and Fire and Rescue Service Reform, Dumfries and Galloway Pathfinder. Who do we have that will be you, right? You here to give us an overview?
Thank you, Chair. This report, so much of it seems so long ago now, but the real reason for coming is really to just get final closure on the project that was the winding down of the Dumfries and Galloway Police and Fire and Rescue Authorities. The reason that it's now coming is that the final work stream of rights, liabilities and obligations included the closure of the council account, which of course included fire and rescue and police for last year. These accounts have now been presented to Audit and Risk Committee and no issues have been raised. Therefore, it seems quite safe now to present this report saying that all the work streams have been concluded. I think what I would say to members, Chair, is that this report also provides members with the assurance that this project was well planned, it was well executed, and we delivered what we were required to do by the 1st of April. In particular, officers from Finance, Legal Services, Human Resources and DG First worked very closely with our colleagues in Police and Fire in the months leading up to the change. And we were particularly commended at various points in the process, not only for the quality of the information that we delivered at the key milestones, but also the fact that we were one of the few authorities that got a lot of it in on time. Therefore, I would ask members to agree that that is the project concluded. Any final work has now moved into a post-project phase. We're still tying up some SLAs with fire and rescue and with the police on some services that we continue to provide. They may still be provided only in the short term, but there's still some paperwork going on. But I would provide members with the assurance that the services are being delivered and we are being paid for them.
Thank you. Just can bring in Councillor Syme.
I could just say at this moment, Andrew, although she's not with us anymore, I think we all must remember the tremendous amount of time and work that Carol Henschel put into this, and she made it happen.
Can we have that recorded? Okay, can we bring in Councillor Ogilvie?
Yeah, I sat on the Pathfinder and found it very worthwhile, and John's right. I remember getting a one-to-one with Carol, and she gave me this document with all the work streams. Took me a week to sleep after that, but anyway. One of the things was the asset transfer, and it's a sugary nail here, but I'm trying to find somewhere to put it in the agenda, was about the control rooms. Now, we asked for a reassurance and nothing would happen for the first year. We've had that said to us by senior officers from both services. within 6 months we lost the fire control room. And it's just put a marker down that we'll resist closure of the police control room. Politically we will resist it. So I just want to put that marker down for yourself. I mean, I know it's not your fault, there'll be a decision made somewhere else, but once we've transferred the assets, it's not our asset anymore. Scotland. However, there's a feeling abroad that we're losing that locality or the localism of policing, and it's also getting centralised. Now, that might not be true, but that's people's perception. So I just wanted to put that down there, Chair, under the transfer of assets. Good shoot, good deal, eh?
I think you've done a very good job there. Thank you. What I would actually like to raise is under the actual work stream, where we're talking about the land being transferred. I remember and recall council and DGHP, when they did the transfer, there was a lot of lands that were not identified, and councillors ended up with the general public getting concerned about lands becoming unkept because nobody knew who it belonged to. Do we definitely have accurate maps of such lands so that we know who is responsible for that? Can I have an issue?
Yes, Chair. I mean, it was an entirely different proposition. The properties that were required to be transferred under this order from DGHP, where a lot of the problems are with, communal areas and closes and all sorts of areas. It's completely different. And we did a thorough title search. That was all also completed with just about every police station and fire property in the area, where we're checking maps, double check them, postcodes, etc. And even on the evening of the 31st of March with the Scottish Government, I was checking those out again to make sure that every postcode was correct. So I can give the assurance that yes, maybe in the future, if the police want to sell something on, or the fire want to sell something on, then we may be asked to just sort out some routine conveyancing. But I do not imagine that there'll be anything on the scale of the problems that we experience with DGH.
Can I also further ask a reassurance on our own council risk register as to whether if it reflects the changes that have now taken place between ourselves?
In what particular aspect, Chair, in terms of removing the risk that we had logged against police and fire previously? Or yeah, I believe that work has been carried out, and anything that has resulted from this project will now be removed as well.
Thank you very much, Ian. Are there any other points or questions that you John, yes, come in.
Just again about Council Ogilvie, we say very much through the reports that we got was the emphasis was in local, and with what's happening now, we are a bit apprehensive in how local we're going to be. And we did ask the question last year. We were told that we wouldn't see any change in the first year, and in the first 6 months things are starting to change. So it's just to reiterate what Council Ogilvie says, the people out there want everything to stay as local as it possibly can, and there is a lot of apprehension. Is this going to happen, or is everything just going to be centralised? There is a fear amongst the communities, Chair.
I think, Councillor Simon, you raise a very fair point, and I would actually ask the question of, we have transferred the funds, over $500,000 back into the pathfinder, or no, the partnership working, but henceforth, will the single forces be able to have a budget that actually identifies and can tackle specific issues that are happening within our region? Or is that something that has to be fed once again right back up to the central office?
Chair, all divisional commanders will have a budget. Obviously, we're just trying to work out the budget lines just now, but part of my job is to plan for the known activities, and you can appreciate in Dumfries and Galloway some are absolutely known, where we're going to have demand with big events, big festivals. The unplanned ones, which are the incidents and the on-the-spot ones, and I have to work within that budget. So there will be, I would anticipate, opportunities for me to bid for potential contingency funding if that was appropriate to do that, and I could not find a way of doing it from within my own budget, or where it was some national directive as well. But I would probably urge some caution, because we do have to make financial savings. And part of my concern is that I wouldn't want to be going down that line when at the same time I have colleagues who are leaving the service because of the reduction in the number of jobs. So it's that very fine balance to make sure you deliver that policing service the most efficiently and effective that you can, but equally drawing on any resource that you can. And I would assure members that that's exactly what I'll do.
Thank you, Kate. Really do appreciate that assurance. Is there any other points that we want to raise at this stage, or are we happy to go to recommendations? Okay, recommendations are: members are asked to agree the conclusion of the project Dumfries and Galloway Police Fire and Rescue Reform, winding down of Police and Fire Rescue Authority, and 7, high-level work streams detailed in paragraph 3.3. Are we in agreement? Thank you very much. Well, I have no further business. Is there anything? Yes, Councillor. Item 6.
Chair, you better exhaust the agenda,
My
Chair.
sincere apologies, Neville. Yes, I'll bring you in on item 6.
Chair, thank you for that. Just to reiterate what Kate just said in the last item, that I've already put forward the proposals for the community activities that I intend to engage in next year, along with the other local senior officers in the West area. So there is a fund set aside for that, and it is about bidding into that fund. On the other side, we do actually have some discretionary funding that's provided locally that I can carry on some of them activities. But it was good to hear that the reserves were also local use in this area. Just to sort of give you, it's a quick update on where things are at the moment. You will receive at the next Police and Fire Committee the 6-monthly report for July to September. But just to sort of give you sort of heads up on interesting activities over the last sort of month or so, we had 5 road traffic accidents, 12 special services, and 18 fires in the month of October. After that, the significant things weren't really the fires that occurred, it's more the water rescue teams that were mobilised at Stuart to search for a missing person in the River Cree. The fire crews also rescued an individual from the River Neff at the weekend. Unfortunately, we weren't able to revive the individual. And the water rescue team was also involved in the release of a young person in quicksand at Sandy Hills. That was very successful. And probably the one fire that was of any interest, even though it was a bin fire, it caused 70 residents in the Golf Avenue area to be evacuated from their premises for a period of time. The bin actually damaged, for members that don't know, the bin actually damaged the gas pipe line. And in putting the bins out, they put the gas out at the same time, which then gave us a secondary issue of the main feed to the meter broken, and took approximately an hour before Transco Scottish Gas could actually come on night. So we had a bit of an issue for a period of time. Bonfire night, meant to be the busiest night of the year for the Fire and Rescue Service. The chair of the board members went to all the fire controls across Scotland just to see what it was like on a busy night. Park Waters and Grant Holmes came to Dumfries. The leader of the council, Councillor Eccleston, joined us that evening. And I know that the chair would have been there, possibly if other events hadn't held them back. That evening, though, we only had 9 incidents. 7 of them were actually we mobilised to 4 were bonfires, 2 were bins, and 1 was a shed on fire. So from a point of view, it's been very, very quiet in Dumfries and Galloway over that bonfire period. And it's been significantly quieter over the whole of Scotland over the same period of time. The bonfire safety message that we put out initially as a national service seemed to have had some effect. it's not just that message, it's actually the work that's done in partnership with the council in the run-up to it by removing, how to put it, bonfires that weren't authorised from unauthorised sites, and taking away, and also providing where you have an authorised site, certainly in northwest Dumfries, where we've actually the council actually provided some wood so they could actually build their own bonfires, meant that they didn't go around and have antisocial behaviour by stripping people's garden fences to burn. So some of that positive sort of activity. And the 4 bonfires that we turned out to, none of them were blue light mobilisations. They were mobilisations on the behest of an agreed policy with the police, that where a bonfire became unattended and there's no suitable adult supervision, then we'd actually go to that bonfire and actually have any injuries. So it's extremely successful that evening. To go on to some of the strategic issues and updates, fire control, Chief Officer Hay, the Chair of the Board, Pat Waters, and ACO Goodhue have met with the police control on a number of occasions now, discussing the future of fire control and what the options are available. And they were very pleased with the staff's, even though the staff have got a lot of concerns, they're very pleased, and they noted their Dumfries and Galloway fire control staff have actually engaged with them to try and move the project forward and moving the calls from Dumfries to Johnson in Strathclyde. And they're looking like that to be completed around about August, September in 2014. So that's another sort of 10 months away. That finishes. There is a special resource review ongoing at the moment, which is things like water rescue, high reach, urban search and rescue, mass decontamination type equipment. That review is currently being undertaken, and I am expecting this time that the outcomes of that review will be certainly fed back to local members, if not consulted upon. I hope it would be. It's also an admin staff review ongoing to make sure that we have the right admin resources in all the areas of Scotland, because with often prior to the move into one service, voluntary redundancy and voluntary severance schemes, they've found that there's a number of areas that are actually void of the correct support staff they need. So it's trying to get policy in place to actually allow support staff to either carry out them activities remotely or from other areas. And that's a kind of policy that I'm trying to push the members about agile working across Scotland, so that if you're looking at protecting jobs in the local area, then that kind of policy would help protect the jobs locally. Industrial action, we had 2 strike dates over the last month down in England, and there were additional resources put into Dumfries and Galloway from the West area to ensure that where we have an incident on the border, and we would have relied on the Cumbria Fire Service to actually report that incident, we had the additional resources there in case we had them. Fortunately, we didn't pick up any incidents for that period. And the last part is probably just a heads up. You know that we have an interim local plan in place that's been running this year that we consulted on last year, this kind of time. I am duty bound to provide a 3-year plan for 2014 to 2017, and that consultation period will start beginning of December. The draft plan being drawn up, it will come out to the area committee, to this committee here, the Community Safety Partnership, and other interested agencies and partners to have a look at that plan, feedback, whereby we'll be able to get it agreed before April 2000.
Thank you very much for that report. Is there any questions and points that members would like?
Just go back to bonfire now. Living in Annan, my wife came from Carlisle. I keep saying what happens in Carlisle because family and that live there, and they experienced quite a serious thing in Raffles Estate, which is notorious. They set a shed on fire and various other things. When the fire rescue people went, they got attacked by fireworks, stones, and everything. So they had to withdraw until the police came. And I know, touch wood, all the years I've been in here, it's been very, very, I think 1 or 2 assaults on fire service. Is that replicated across Scotland? Is there less violence to fire staff in Scotland than England?
I can't confirm what the national trends are, but I will say that we had no attacks on firefighters in Dumfries and Galloway at all. We had a couple years ago, but I do know that North Ayrshire had, I think, 8 occasions where fire crews were attacked, and Glasgow had a number of occasions as well. But the Highlands and Islands were very similar to us. They didn't have any attacks either. So it has reduced over the years, but I think that's down to how we handle it and the policies between the police and the fire and rescue service. That we are trying not to disrupt people's enjoyment, but where there is no suitable adult in place, or the dangers that occur at these bonfire sites, then we move in and actually extinguish the fire. But it's been very much supported by the police.
Thank you. Can I bring in Councillor McCutcheon and then Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. If you would allow me, can I take this opportunity to ask Neville to pass on to his colleagues in Stranraer? I was at the fireworks display in Stranraer, and it was horrendous weather. But what a great job they made. Everybody enjoyed it. It was lovely to see the community come together. I don't know if there was anything put in the local paper, but I really appreciate it. Pass on. From my point of view, a thank you and a well done.
Councillor McCutcheon, thank you for that. I probably omitted that from the report, but for those that don't know, that the firefighters in Stranraer actually got their pyrotechnics certificates, so they could actually put on the display in Stranraer. So there was working along with the community, and it also happened in Whithorn as well at the same time. And there's no issues at all for me.
Councillor Nicholl.
Yeah, just comment. Ronnie, I think it was talked about the police and fire brigade being attacked in parts of my ward. Santa gets attacked, so, you know, everything's in perspective. But what I was going to ask Neville was when Pat Waters was down, was there any acknowledgement that the consultation and the closure of the control room, proposed closure, pending closure of the control room, was consultation was rubbish?
I know you weren't at the last meeting. Oh, you were? Oh, well, you know, we give him a hard time, and I can't remember the other guy, the guy with the tweed suit on. Can you remember who he was? Aye. He come and got me before we went for a meal, and he said that was the best scrutiny he'd ever seen. So, you know, we do some things right, Chair. So, yeah, I think they got the message loud and clear that they can't change anything, Graham. Remember he said that. But, sorry, I didn't want to cut across you, Neville. I mean, maybe you've got more to add.
All I would say is that the comments that came from that Police and Fire Committee has actually reverberated through the rest of the organisation, because it's been mentioned at SLT, it's been mentioned at the board meeting, it's also been mentioned at the local senior officers meeting only just yesterday about getting consultation right. And so hopefully that they have learned that lesson.
Chair, I could just go back. It's not a case of getting it right, it's a case of implementing some sort of consultation.
Yes, I'm sure that they've got that now loud and clear. Right, there's no recommendation on that particular one to agree on. Ronnie, you
Just on the back of that, maybe a question for Rona, but the customer desks for police stations has gone up to consultation, from what I gather from watched Mr. House when he was getting questioned in the Parliament, and he said no, there's going to be consultation learning from what happened with the fire. So the question is, when do we see the consultation coming through here, or is it going to be the local communities that are directly affected? I'm sure this committee would have a say on that.
I haven't seen that particular one coming at the moment. They usually come into the chief executive and then they're distributed across whatever department is best placed to respond to that. But I'll find out where we are in the consultation cycle, and I'll get back to you on that within the council.
We're talking about public counters. It's gone out and it was subject to discussion at full council, where comments went back from the full council and that are currently being considered in terms of all additional comments that are made. So I'm not sure when that is due for release at the moment, but I definitely know that they have received the council from here's view on that consultation proposal that was put forward along with traffic. No, it was to extend, I think, the consultation just to take on board all the points. And actually, I didn't want to land a minute, but ACC Mawson is actually the lead for that, so perhaps he can put a bit more clarity on it.
I certainly can. It's kind of taken over my life for the last 6 weeks. The consultation is now closed. That's crystal clear. We wrote to people just to clarify that point the other day there. However, what the Chief Constable has said is that while we are now collating some 200 plus responses, if there are any last minute observations that people want to make during this next 4 to 6 weeks, well, we're pulling all this together and deciding what we do next, then we will listen to that as well. So it's not a formal extension of the consultation period. The consultation period is closed, but we will still listen to any late notifications while we're making final decisions. When those final decisions have been made, we'll go back to the police authority and then we'll contact local authorities again with exactly where we're going.
Thank you. Okay. One thing I would like to say at this stage as well, and that is to thank both Kate and Neville for affording us the time, both John and myself, to sit with you, and very much look forward to continuing that relationship. I think it's extremely important that this particular committee develops itself in such a way that we can make sure that we are all focusing on this region, getting the best results. Right. Any other business? We're quite happy with my earlier statement. And well, thank you all for your participation. Bye for now.